On today's episode, we're excited to host Brett Crawley, a principal application security engineer with over 25 years in software engineering and more than a decade in AppSec. Brett's not only CISSP, CSSLP, and CCSP certified, but he's also the project lead on the OWASP Application Security Awareness Campaign project and the author of the O-String Security blog. In this episode, we'll explore the significance of using games in the workplace, specifically for threat modeling. We'll delve into the elevation of privilege card game and its origins, and we'll discuss whether Stride is dead, alive, or evolving. Brett will also walk us through the book that he's written about this game, and he'll cover his Miro template, which helps to enhance threat modeling with the game. So stay tuned for a conversation on integrating security by design into the SDLC and optimizing risk reduction through a data-driven approach to AppSec.
The Application Security Podcast is brought to you by Security Journey. Security Journey is an enterprise-class solution with lessons that are built on learning science principles to deliver long-term, measurable results. Learn more at securityjourney.com.
Hey folks, welcome to another episode of the Application Security Podcast. This is Chris Romeo. I am the CEO of Davici, the threat modeling company. And as a matter of fact, we're going to talk about something related to threat modeling today. I'm also joined by my co-host, and as I like to say, threat modeling person to the stars, Robert Hurlbut.
Hey, Chris. Yeah, Robert Hurlbut, Principal Application Security Architect and Threat Modeling Lead at Acquia. And yeah, this is a great topic to talk about, threat modeling. We enjoy that immensely.
Yeah, it's like almost the only thing we ever talk about if we get the chance. But well, we talk about other things too. But excited to be joined by Brett Crawley, who has written a recent book on the topic of threat modeling, and that's threat modeling gameplay with EoP. We're going to break that down, and don't worry if you don't know what that means yet, because you're about to find out. But Brett, before we jump into threat modeling and elevation of privilege, tell us your security origin story. If there was a comic book in the life of Brett Crawley, specifically to security, what would we find in release or episode number 1 of that book?
Okay, in episode 1, you'd probably find it was back in about 2000. I was asked to extract information from PDF documents. And at the time, there wasn't a decent, well, there wasn't a library for doing RC4 decryption in Java, but there was in Bruce Schneier's book in C. So I ported it to Java, and that was how it all started. I got a little bit into cryptography, started doing digital signatures, and then I ended up working for a company doing search engines for electronics industry. So I was always doing more and more parsing, more and more text extraction and things of that nature. I ended up at the European Commission, where I was developing a product a bit like Maltego for doing OSINT. It was the OSINT suite for the European Commission, multilingual, multi-script, and involved some machine learning for translating the characters. And it was, again, there was some cryptography involved. And gradually I was getting more and more towards security throughout my career. And so I eventually went, well, what am I messing about at, right? Why don't I just start doing security? And so I moved from, I'd been working as a software engineer for like the past 25 years. Well, at that point, probably about 15 years, but I'd been doing bits and pieces of security all the way through. And so then I started doing AppSec, and I've developed stuff to do with single sign-on with Kerberos, bit of everything. and but now instead of just developing a more security solutions, I've been more around actually working with teams and helping them develop their solutions.
Okay, very cool. So diving into our topic today, to get us started, question about, Brett, what is the significance of using games in the workplace?
Well, it's engaging. I mean, often engineers don't want to step back from the keyboard, and they don't want to. They're they're very focused. It's I guess it's a mindset, and I remember when I was just doing development work. Sometimes you just want to be focused on the development, and you don't want distractions. And I often find that they see threat modeling, and they see discussions around security as not being relevant to them. And it's trying to convince the teams to get involved and participate so that you get the information needed, and you also build their awareness. So it's getting people involved. It's the engagement factor, and that's where the games come in, because if you can make it fun, then it's more engaging.
So how about the elevation of privilege card game? So I know that's just a spoiler alert. That's the EoP that we talked about in the book title.
Yeah.
But let's unpack for our audience, what is elevation of privilege? Where did it come from? Who created it, and what was the purpose behind it?
Okay. Elevation of privilege, well, is a threat category. And elevation of privilege is where you can either, an attacker can either gain higher privileges, or they can move laterally and they can take on somebody else's privileges of the same level, but they can therefore see the data. So that's what elevation of privilege is. But the game is, it's a card game, and it was it's a card game where the suits of the card game are the different stride categories, but at the same time, it's played like you play tricks. So you basically you're trying to win a hand by having the highest card, and it's got a trump in a trump suit, which is the elevation of privilege suit. And you're on each card in each suit, you've got a description of a threat, but it's quite a high level. And that threat is so that you can look at your architecture and try and find somewhere in that architecture that type of threat. So it's left reasonably high level intentionally, so that you can find different threats within your architecture. So
is there just to clarify here, make sure I understand, we sit down at a table, Robert and I are developers, there's a few other developers with us, you're the game, you're kind of running the game for us.
Yeah.
Do we have an architecture on paper that we kind of put in the middle of the table that we all look at, and that's what that's the basis of the game? Or where does the source of that architecture come from?
Okay. So you would put your architecture on paper, on paper or on a whiteboard, however you prefer. You could even do it digitally on something like Miro. And you on that architecture diagram, you obviously you will need to put things like trust boundaries. And a trust boundary, for those who don't know, is where data is flowing from one level of protection or one level of security into another. So perhaps going from your internal network to your through your firewall and onto the internet, might be tunneled, but it's still going through the internet to some other place. So the minute it moves from one of these areas into another, that's where your boundary is. So you've got you would draw these onto your diagram so you know where those boundaries are, so that you know when the level of protection that piece of data that's flowing is changing, and you can then put mitigations in place to improve the security of that piece of data, perhaps when it's in transit via TLS, so cryptography. And you design it, you put this onto your diagram, which you'd put on a whiteboard or on the table, like you said, and you maybe put the threats onto that with Post-it notes, as an example. And you just stick them on where you can see the threat. And when I was talking about the threat descriptions being on the cards, they're really like prompts, so that the team, when they're looking at this diagram, I've got this threat. Where might I find it on the diagram? And so the diagram is there to help everybody in the room be on the same page and have the same context. Well, have a context, because they all have different contexts. That's another thing about the game. Should really have different members or different team members, in the sense you should have maybe somebody from product, maybe even somebody from ARC, who knows what what your I'm just trying to think what legal issues you may have if the data escapes. So that's from a privacy aspect. Then you've got maybe somebody from the front end, and a front end engineer, a back end engineer, and you've got these different people, and they will each have different context. In the legal person will have the concerns about how this could affect the company in a litigation situation. The product person will have a knowledge of perhaps something that the way the customer uses the product that the engineers aren't aware of. And so you got this mix of people. So the diagram sort of brings everybody together, and then they can, they're discussing all of their different ideas of what the threat how the threat could manifest itself.
And so the cards and the gameplay acts as a catalyst.
Yes.
To get them thinking about the particular architecture that they have in front of them. Yeah. Now, does anybody win? Because when I play games, I want to win all of them. And so is there how am I declared the winner? Is that a possibility?
There's more than one winner. I mean, there's the customer, but there's also for each trick, whoever has the highest card wins the trick. But when you put a card down, if you find a threat in the on the diagram, and you add that to the model, you score a point for finding that threat. If you, you can add variance to this. So if you can find more than one threat, you can get at least 2 points. If you can steal or do an assist for somebody else, then you can get an additional point as well. So you could arrive at 3, and if you won the hand, you've got 4 points for just one hand. And then at the end of the game, it's whoever's got the most points, basically.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But I mean, the real winner is the company, because or the customer as well, because the more threats you find, the more secure, hopefully, the product's going to be.
Yeah, I still like to win. the game myself personally. It's good that the company is winning as well, but there will be one
Well, I
winner
mean,
at the table.
Yeah, I've run several sessions of the game before, and I remember one in particular where there was a number of folks who were playing, and there was one person at the game they were definitely cleaning up. they were assisting, they were gaining points, and they were doing really well, and so they loved it. But it's been great to see in my experience when running sessions with the game.
Yeah.
Just to go back and revisit. Who created the game, and do you know why they created the game?
Adam Shostak created the game when he was working at Microsoft. I don't know the exact details of why he created the game, but I know that when he was at Microsoft, he did create it, and it also features in his book there's a section at the back where it actually explains what the cards mean. He created it when he was there. I don't know the full details of why, but presumably to try.
We'll ask him if he's been a guest on the podcast a number of times. So
Yeah.
next time he swings by, we'll make sure we get an answer to that, to why he did. So let's be a little controversial.
Okay.
So what are your thoughts on Stride? Is it dead? Is it alive? Is it in need of an evolution?
I wouldn't say it's dead, but I would say that it perhaps needs a bit of an evolution. It's a funny one because with Stride, what you've got is you're finding a threat, but you would normally have a chain of threats. So one threat would lead to another. And in that respect, it's sort of missing something because you should be, you don't know which category. Sometimes when you look at it, you go, okay, this is the threat, but then it's also two things at the same time. Which category should I put it in? And the team members, when you're threat modeling, they're often asking you that because a tampering threat could be caused by any number of. Where I'm trying to think of an example off the bat. I've got loads of them in the book.
Well, insecure data flows or open data flows, for example, things like that then can lead to tampering. And then once you've done that, what else could you do, and so forth? Yeah.
Well, also information disclosure. It's by managing to steal somebody's credentials and then spoof them, you gain access to data which isn't yours. So is that spoofing? Is that elevation of privilege because you've actually moved laterally? That you are, it's an information disclosure. There's like 3 different potential categories that you could apply to that. It becomes sometimes difficult to decide where to put things. And I also did some mind maps, which were mapping CAPEC to Stride. And sometimes it was like, well, where does this go? And so I actually put it in both to try and so that people, when they were looking at it, they could go, oh, well, yeah, okay, it could go either way.
Yeah, no, I would say kind of where I land on this issue is I also think there's a need for an evolution.
Right.
But what I've realized, and I came to this realization in another conversation on a different podcast, a Security Table, that I do with Izar Tarandash and Matt Coles. Somebody had posted on LinkedIn that Stride was dead, and so we immediately said, "Oh, we gotta unpack this ourselves." And what I realized as we started to dive into it is Stride really needs some modern examples of how those categories play out. So like we started to play around with it, and we were like, "Oh, tampering." an attacker modifying an open source package, whether they're doing it in the repo or whether they're modifying it and, tricking somebody into downloading something, like they're tampering with the software, like that's an example of a modern tampering. And I think Stride, as it sits now, it leads us back to, well, tampering is messing with data on the wire between 2 points. And then people can say, well, we've got TLS everywhere now, which we don't, unfortunately. We have TLS most places. I will never say everywhere. There's always places people have forgotten it, right?
Yeah.
But that's, I think, the piece that's missing here with Stride right now is I still believe in it. I think it's an important teaching tool for people. But I think it's missing some middleware that translates it more, because Stride's over 20 years old, right? And everybody thinks that Adam created Stride. Adam didn't create Stride. Lauren Kornfelder and another individual at Microsoft are the creators of Stride. And so what I think it really needs, though, is it needs some of that connective tissue that brings us into some modern 2024/2025 examples of how those categories play out now at almost 25 years after Stride was originally created.
To a certain extent, the CAPEX Stride mapping does that because it takes up, but I mean, even CAPEX isn't complete because, and neither is CWE, because one covers some areas and the other covers others. And you sort of, social engineering, I think, is it missing? I can't remember whether it's missing from I think it's missing from CWE and not from CAPEX.
Yeah, I think that's true.
And so you've got, in CAPEX, there are some other areas that are missing, and you've got some more modern technologies in like containers and cloud, and they're covered, but it's very bland in that respect. And so they need enriching with a bit more, a few more of the newer things that we're seeing out there in the wild. Both technologies and the threats. But yeah, I mean, I agree. But Adam has actually added some cards in, I think it was 2022, to the tampering deck to cover things like when you've got tampering with within a repo, if I remember correctly.
Okay. Well, with that in mind, I know in your book that you covered some other extensions to the game.
Yes.
For example, privacy and trim, TRIM. Could you describe those or explain those to us and understand what those mean? Privacy and trim.
Okay, so the privacy one, that was by Mark, I can't remember his last name, but he was at Log Me In. He added an extension which was a privacy suite, and it covers pretty much GDPR. It goes through the different types of threat around minimization, around not using people's data for things that they haven't agreed to. So when they've signed up, you shouldn't be using it for anything that wasn't in that original agreement. And you've also got things around, and they're not sharing their data, around protecting their data within when it's within your system, and so that's just the privacy suite. But then you've got trim, which is also known as elevation of privacy, and it's an extension to elevation of privilege, but he covers the different private or 4 different privacy categories. Those are transfer. So when the data is transferred across region or into different countries, so not just from continent to continent, but also within a continent. Then you've got retention and removal. So that's looking more at the things like how long you can keep the data. And if you are going to keep the data, you can keep it but you have to anonymize it. And there are also legal holds where you might be forced to keep it because it's in the greater, it's in the interests of the greater good. So law enforcement would need to see that, so they've subpoenaed it or whatever. Then you've got inference. So when you are constructing data from people's data, and the ethical aspects of that as well. And then the last one is minimization. So basically don't store or don't gather more than you need to. Because, if they've only agreed to allow you to do a certain task, and you're not using this data for that task, why would you be gathering it? So legally, you're not entitled to it.
So can I take these cards that are extensions and put them together with the original EoP?
Yes.
Like, do they all fit together in the same game?
Yeah. You can just add. You can take suits out of the deck and add others in, or you can just increase the deck. Obviously, that's going to increase the amount of time that you're playing the game, which some people might find positive, others might find it's disruptive. So you have to sort of balance things out. But yeah, you can add these into the deck, and you can perhaps choose the ones that are most relevant to this particular project or this particular feature, because you might just be threat modeling a feature of an existing project.
How long does one of these games take to run on average?
On average, it's about 3 hours.
Okay.
But that's that's if you're doing a feature, as opposed to if you're doing a greenfield project, or if you're doing a project that in perhaps not legacy, but it's been in development quite a while, and you're looking to threat model the historical development as well as what's coming, then it's going to take longer. I mean, it could take 6 hours, 9 hours. How long's a piece of string? Depends on what detail you want to go in. It depends on whether your architecture diagram is high level or so like Duplo, or whether it's low level like micro Lego.
So is the goal then that I finish the card game and the threat model's done?
No, it's a living document. You should be continuing to threat model throughout the life of the application.
Do we keep coming back to the game, or does the game just get us rolling into the threat modeling process, or do we have a follow-on game 3 months in the future, whatever, at some time interval?
You can have a follow-on game anytime in the future to update the diagram or the model with the new threats for the new developments that you're planning, because it should be done before you implement, ideally, so that you can correct the design before you start implementing. Because I use the example of a house in the book, where if you build a house and you don't put a front wall on it, then it doesn't matter how strong the doors and locks are, you're never going to be able to secure it. And if you do go back, if you do want to fix that problem, you're going to have to go right back to the foundations, because you've still got to stitch the walls together when you... Depends on what materials you're using, obviously, but if you're using bricks, then you're going to have to stitch the walls together at the corners. You're going to have to put the foundations in, and it may never be as strong as it would have been had it been correct from the onset with the design. Whereas a door has a standard lock fitting that if that particular lock isn't strong enough, you can just take it out and you can put a new one in. So that's an implementation problem as opposed to a design problem.
Yeah. So you mentioned as a key to success for a threat modeling game. One of the things you already mentioned was diversification of role, which is a threat modeling manifesto principle. So that's something that we put in the manifesto specifically because we all really believe in that as well. What are some of the other keys to success in having an actionable threat modeling game?
I mean, you need to. I mean, the people involved need to have a good understanding of the system that they are developing. If they don't, if you have people who are looking at a legacy system and they don't have sufficient knowledge of the system, the architecture diagram is a bit ragged, and they've never threat modeled before, then it's going to be an uphill struggle. If you've got people who are familiar with the product they're developing, they have a good architecture diagram, a data flow diagram, and they don't necessarily have to have threat modeled before, but they need at least somebody who can guide them and help them in doing that threat modeling. And I think having, for people who are new to threat modeling, having somebody facilitate the meeting and help give them guidance is of fundamental importance, or at least having some way of them being able to visualize what the problems might be, which is why I came up with the book. I mean, basically, for people who don't have a mentor or a facilitator for the meetings, when I've been facilitating threat modeling sessions, I've had people say, well, what does this card mean? Can you give us an example? And so originally the book was just meant to be a collection of examples, so that when they were looking at the card and they were looking at their architecture, they could go, okay, so it could be something like this. Where are we doing something like that in this diagram? And it's just to help them understand how it could manifest itself. It might not be identical, but it's to give them an idea. And that was why I came up with it. It was just, if I kept up being asked to give examples, then I was fairly confident that, well, probably other people were as well. And maybe it would help them have an example to hand when they need one, because when you have to come up with one on the spur of the moment, you don't perhaps want to tell them exactly where the threat is in the diagram or on their architecture, because that's not going to help them learn for when they threat model again. So by giving them a sort of generic example, they can then go, okay, I get it now. And they go and find it in their architecture.
Okay. So one of the things that you made available was a Miro template.
Yeah.
And tell us how that works with the threat modeling with the elevation of privileged card game.
Okay, a bit like we were saying about having the diagram on the table or on a whiteboard. Obviously, a Miro board is a digital whiteboard, if you like. And for threat modeling with EoP, what I did was I created different areas for each suit, because you're supposed to start with the tampering suit, and then whoever wins that round chooses the next suit to go to. So I created different sections for each suit on the whiteboard, the digital whiteboard, and put a list of the cards down the side. Originally, I'd put graphics for each card. But when you're submitting the to Miro to get them approved for Miroverse, they prefer it if they've got like a style guide, and they prefer that you use their elements, and to redesign all of the cards individually would have taken an enormous amount of effort, and it was losing some of the structure to because, well, it was difficult to design the cards like that. So what I did was I took the within the deck, you've got a card which has the list of all of the threats on all of the cards in that suit, and so I took those and I put those into the board, and then I added post-its for pink ones for the threats, orange ones for proposed mitigations, and green ones for mitigations that are already existing in the design or in the implementation. Now, when we talk about threat modeling, it's often said we shouldn't think in mitigations, and I agree with that statement. We should be thinking in terms of threats, because you're trying to document all of the potential problems, and you do that because you can then add the detail to say, okay, we've actually fixed this already, or we've thought of this, so that in the case of a litigation, you can show that you've done your due diligence. So that's why I've also included all of the potential mitigations and the existing mitigations. So you do the threat model, and then you can add the mitigations to the board afterwards, or during even, as potential solutions. And at the end of it, you can, there's a Jira plugin, I think, for Jira app, I think it's called, for Miro. And from there, you can right-click on your orange tickets, and you can create your Jira tickets straight from there, which is quite helpful.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So give me the 60-second plug for the book here, because I feel like we kind of unpacked a lot of this stuff, but we didn't necessarily tie it directly back to the book as far as what people are going to get. So give us the 60-second book pitch here.
It's great for new starters who are threat modeling, because it gives them the instructions on how to play the game, gives them examples for every threat in the deck, and it also gives them potential mitigations that they can put in place, along with references where they can go and read up further about the threat. So it can be used for when you are doing the threat modeling, for gathering the requirements for the different mitigations as well.
Cool. Thank you for sharing that.
Okay.
Robert, I think it is time for you to shine.
All right.
In the lightning round.
All right. Let's jump in the lightning round. So we have 3 questions.
Okay.
The first one is, what's your most controversial opinion on application security, and why do you hold this view?
Okay. The ratio of AppSec to engineers is ludicrously unbalanced, and at the same time, the support for tooling is to try and balance that out, so that because if you've got like 1 to 200 ratio, to be able to support those 200 people, you need to have sufficient tooling to be able to put automation in place. Otherwise, you can't cope with the workload. And this is something that you see right across industry. And because of this, I think it's weakening the overall security posture of industry in general. And I think there are things that we can do to optimize. And I know that people talk about reachability, and they talk about VEX, and they talk about SPOM, but it all needs to be linked together. And I think the way to do that is by creating a graph and enriching the graph with all of the information to be able to. But this is more related to pinpointing the risk so that you can define the priorities.
Okay. Thank you.
Does that answer that one?
Yes. Thank you. So next question is, if you could display a single message on a billboard at the RSA or Black Hat conference, what would it say?
We need to think out of the box to find the best way to optimize.
Okay. All right. And last question, what's your top book recommendation and why do you find it valuable? Any book, it doesn't have to be technical, but any book that you would recommend.
Okay. I think Fred Kaufman, Conscious Business, was an excellent book for me, because I've always been told I'm too direct, and it explains some aspects of communication and behavior that I was missing, and it helped me a lot mature in my approach. Examples might be that sometimes it's easier to just you need to let things go, as opposed to because the value in them isn't perhaps as high as you think it is. You need to understand the bigger picture and see that, okay, for you it's important, but what's the greater value? So sometimes it's better to just let it pass.
All right. Well, as we come towards the end of our interview here, Brett, I want to give you a chance to share a key takeaway or a call to action for our audience.
Okay. I think I know your application threat models existing code, but my call to action would be to threat model early. So because, like I said before, your application also allows you to do the drawing, but the AI part will do the analysis of the code as well and generate your threat model. But the sooner you threat model, the better, to try and protect against the design flaws. I need to look at the latest versions of what you've been doing, because I've been tied up with lots of other stuff recently. So I'm curious to see how it's evolved, because I only saw it in its initial stages. So, yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, Brett, thank you for sharing this knowledge about elevation of privilege and how to programatize this and make it work with a group of technical folks who are building things. I know I did not have as much knowledge about EoP coming into this as Robert does. So I learned some things about how the game works and how it comes together. So thanks for writing the book. The book is entitled Threat Modeling Gameplay with EoP, and I'm sure you can find it wherever you buy books from. I don't know where people buy books from these days, but I'm sure it's on Amazon. I found it on Amazon, and I'm sure it's in other places as well. So
Adam wrote the foreword for it as well. So Adam, who invented the game, so Adam Shostak, he also wrote the foreword.
Oh, nice. Very cool. Very cool. Well, thanks, Brett. I look forward to having another chat with you at some point in the future.
Cool. Thanks a lot.